So hello everybody, I'm happy to welcome you here at the Biogas platform today. We have a tight schedule that I will try to lead you through. My name is Chris Preuss. I work for the Danish Agriculture and Food Council, and I will introduce you to the speakers of the day and take your questions as we get along with the speakers. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. His name is Bruno Nielsen. He's the technical director at the Danish Biogas Association. I know Bruno very well. He's the perfect speaker to talk about the Danish model for biogas. So give him a warm welcome here at the stage, and looking forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me? Yes. I've been invited to talk about the Danish biogas model, and this is one of my favorite topics. I have been working in the Danish Biogas Association for 25 years, trying to promote the production and use of biogas. If you look into the purpose of the Danish Biogas Association, then we work to promote the production and the use of biogas. We promote not only the gas, but also the circular economy use, the residues for producing fertilizers. We are working on the networking and knowledge sharing within the Danish biogas sector with meetings for the managers and so on. Our members are all the stakeholders in the biogas sector, the owners of the biogas plants, the technology suppliers, the consultants, and the energy sector and the waste sector. And we are having approximately 200 members, and our members make up 95% of the Danish biogas production. If you look into the Danish biogas production the last 25 years, we can see actually nothing happened for many years, but then within the last 10 years, the biogas production has increased very rapidly due to new framework conditions. If we go 25 years back, we can see that 60% of the biogas came from the wastewater treatment plants and the landfills, and only 40% of the agricultural biogas plant. Now it's 95% of the biogas that comes from the agricultural plants, where we co-digest livestock manure with residues from industry and households and agriculture. So right now, in the Danish biogas plants, we digest 30% of the livestock manure. 35% of the gas in the Danish gas grid is biogas. So we are very fast moving ahead on a renewable gas in the Danish gas infrastructure. So the Danish biogas model is, of course, we take the livestock manure and we mix that with organic residues from households, industry, and service sector. And if I should describe the Danish biogas plants in one word, then I would say it's a fertilizer factory, because we take the livestock manure, turns that into a better fertilizer, and we take all the residues from all the nutrients from the residues and recirculate those as fertilizers on the farmland. And then, of course, we are having the byproduct, the biomethane and the CO2 content, the biogas, which is to be used in the energy sector, and our purpose is to stabilize the energy sector where we cannot electrify or to deliver the electricity when there's no supply from the windmills or the solar panels. Then we can use biogas from the gas grid and use that. We can also use organic catch crops from the organic farmers and make sure that they can have a better fertilizer on their land. So to wrap up, we turn residues from agriculture, industry, and households into a sustainable fertilizer with reduced climate and environmental footprint, and the biogas will fill the gap in the green transition where electricity do not meet the needs. We are based on residues. When we look into what goes into the biogas plants, and these are the newest figures for the 12-month period from August to July this year, we can see 75% of what goes in is livestock manure, and 1/3 of the biogas comes from the livestock manure. Residues from industry and food waste from the household is 15-20% of the input, and another 1/3 of the biogas we produce. If you look into the energy crops, only 4% of what goes into the biogas plants is energy crops, and it's 10% of the produced gas. Therefore, we are based on residues. And then, of course, we have glycerin. That's 1% of what goes in, but 15% of the produced biogas. But this is a very expensive way of producing biogas. Then the question is, do we have enough resources to supply the energy sector? And this is a report made by one of the next speakers, Henrik Wenzel. He made a report for the Danish Energy Agency 3 years ago, looking into the potential feedstocks to the Danish biogas sector. And when we look into the future, 2040 or 2050, then we can produce 90 petajoules of biogas based on residues, and at that time the Danish natural gas consumption was pretty much close to 90 petajoules. So we can see we do have the resources in liquid livestock manure, solid livestock manure, organic residues, food waste, agricultural residues, and the main resource, unutilized resource, is straw, but we can totally substitute the natural gas production. When we look into the future, what will happen? This is the expected natural gas consumption in Denmark based on the reports from the Danish Energy Agency last year, and this is their expectation for the increasing biogas production. And you can see the natural gas consumption will decrease and the biogas production will increase, and their forecast was that by 2035 we might have a 100% supply of biogas in the sector. What has happened in this year with the war in Ukraine is that we will have a much faster phasing out of the use of natural gas. We can actually increase the biogas production more rapidly, and this means that by 2027 we can totally substitute natural gas and have 100% renewable gas supply in Denmark. This is the same figures to show you, but in more details. The use of biogas directly in the CHP plant, the use of biogas in household, you can see those will be phased out, and the use of gas as a backup in the power and heat sectors and in industry. And this was a frozen policy made by the Energy Agency 12 months ago. And this is our projection right now, with a more rapid decrease in the use of natural gas, a more fast production of biogas, then we can meet the 100% in 2027, as I said before. But this will also leave room for an increased production of biogas, either to export to other European countries or to use it in new sectors, such as in the transportation sector. What does it mean? This means that we will use a lot of more biomasses in the Danish biogas plants. And we project that we, by end of this century, will utilize 2/3 of the livestock manure in Danish biogas plants, and perhaps as much as 1/3 of the straw. So we will not be in a lack of biomasses. We are still having more biomasses to utilize. And again, this is the projection of the Danish Biogas Association, and this was the projection based on the frozen policy from the Danish Energy Agency last year. I can say in their new projections, they do not expect a decrease in the biogas production after 2030, but this is too detailed to talk about right now. But what does this mean when we utilize 2/3 of the livestock manure in the Danish biogas plants? This means that we will turn the livestock manure into a better fertilizer. We will also reduce the risk of leaching of nitrates. We have projected this for every ton of livestock manure that goes into the biogas plants, the leaching will be decreased. And when we will reach 2/3 of the livestock manure being digested in 10 years' time, then we can reduce the leaching with 1,600 tons per year. Is that much or not much? We can say we have a national target decided by the parliament that we had to reduce with 10,400 tons. So we cannot bring us in in total into reaching the legislation, but we can sure deliver a very good part of it. Another thing we are doing is, of course, we handle a lot of nutrients in the digestate, and this is the phosphorus. And you know, phosphorus is a very severe, scarce resource. We might have phosphorus we can dig out in mines in a few places globally, and perhaps we can dig that up for the next 100 or 200 years, but we simply need to recirculate the nutrients. And this is again the number of tons in phosphorus we are handling in the biogas plants. And of course, you can see the livestock manure has most of the phosphorus. But if we take the livestock manure out of it, we can still see a lot of phosphorus we will recirculate in food waste, in residues from industry and from agricultural parts. Is that much or not much? If we look into the use of phosphorus in chemical fertilizers in Denmark, then it's 13,000 tons. So we can actually deliver what's 50% of that. And of course, also with the very high natural gas prices, the very high prices on nitrogen fertilizers, then it also has a value for the farmers that they can use the digestate as a fertilizer. What then about the climate effect? When we take the livestock manure, and that's on the farm, then there will be an emission of methane, a very heavy climate gas. But when you bring the livestock manure into the biogas plant, then we will pick up the methane and decrease the emission of methane. And again, for every tons of livestock manure we take into the biogas plants, instead of handling in an agricultural system without biogas, then we will reduce the emission of methane from agriculture. And the methane we pick up, we can use to substitute natural gas, and of course reduce the CO2 emissions from the energy sector. So we can add those two and reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases with up to 5.5 million tons within the next 10 years. Of course, we do have a use of energy, electricity and diesel to fuel the plants and the logistics. But when we take care of that, then we have the net reduction here. So this is a very efficient tool to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from both agriculture and from the energy sector. This is going to be a little bit complicated. This shows what happened the younger we can get the slurry out of the stables. This is the emission of methane in a slaughter pig farm with handling the livestock manure as they do today. If we bring the livestock manure to a biogas plant, then we will reduce the emission of methane to this level. And of course, we can utilize the methane to substitute natural gas. This means that the net emission of greenhouse gases from this farm will be reduced with 50%. If we could get the livestock manure out of the farms before it's 1 week old, then we'll reduce the emission of methane in the stables even more, and actually can increase the biogas production. And if we could get it in a line range system where we get the livestock manure out of the stables on a daily basis, then we actually could make a climate negative pig farm. And it's more or less the same in cattle, and this is just to compare a biogas solution with acidification. And you can see that the greenhouse gas reduction is much higher in the biogas system than in the acidification system. What happens then when we take the straw and put that into the digesters? The straw could be incorporated into the soil, leaving carbon in the soil. But we know that when we incorporate straw in the soil, then it will be degraded very rapidly by the soil microorganisms. When we take the straw and bring it into the biogas plants, then the microorganisms will also digest it in the digesters, But this means that the fibers that comes out on the fields with a digestate, they are the hardly degradable, the long-term survival fibers. And this means that in the longer term, then we will actually have more or less the same incorporation of carbon in the soil with a biogas system and without biogas. And remember, we are still making biogas that will substitute natural gas. This is made by one of the PhD students of Henrik Wenzel, a very, very good work. How have we come to where we are right now? This is, of course, based on a political climate where the Danish parliament has wanted to promote biogas. And as I said in the beginning, biogas is not just only a story about renewable energy. And this slide shows that this is the political decisions in different sectors, in the agricultural policy, of course, in the energy policy, in the waste handling policy, and in the climate policy. Each of them has delivered one small part for the development of the biogas. In 2009, the Danish Parliament decided that they wanted to reduce the impact of agriculture on the aquatic environment, and one of the tools was to promote the biogas sector. They introduced investment grants. This was right after the financial crisis, so the financing of the projects was a problem. And they put up a target that by 2020 we should digest half of the livestock manure. We didn't reach that, but as you saw, we are at 30% right now. Of course, in the energy policy, we have the feed-in tariffs for the production of the biogas. In the circular economy, we have the target that we should stop incinerating organic waste. Organic waste in the household should be source separated and brought to the biogas plants so that we can recirculate the nutrients. And then finally, in 2019, we had an election to the parliament. This was called the Climate Parliament election because climate change was the #1 issue. And the new government, or new parliament, decided that by 2030, we have to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases with 70% in Denmark. What the government did was to establish a number of climate partnerships in a number of industrial or sectors, one for industry, one for agriculture, one for transportation, one for aviation, one for the financial sector. Each of them should make their own plan to reach their 70% target. What they actually came up with, there were 14 climate partnerships. In 10 of those, biogas was one of the tools for them to reach their climate obligation in their own sector. This slide shows what is happening. 10 years ago, all the biogas in Denmark was used in the local combined power and heat plants. Actually, all the increase in the biogas production is now turned into biomethane. We take the CO2 content out of the biogas, inject the biomethane into the gas grid, and right now, this year, at least 80% of the biogas is being upgraded and put into the gas grid. And this is very important because then we produce something the other sectors in the renewable energy sector cannot do yet, because we produce storable renewable energy. Put the biogas into the gas grid, leave it there for an hour or a week or a month or a year, distribute it wherever we need it, and this way we can make use of it when we do not have the other alternatives. And this is very important because we can store a lot of energy here. If we took an example saying that we took electricity and turned that into methane in a methanation process, then we could actually store in the amount of electricity we could store in the Danish gas grid equals the electricity that was needed to fuel Teslas on a parking lot that goes 13 times around the globe. So it's a huge battery. And if you look into the CO2 content of the gas grid and the power grid, then everybody expects that the electricity is green. We have a lot of wind power and a lot of solar panels. Of course, this is green. But what this shows is that actually right now the CO2 intensity in the gas grid is lower than in the electricity grid. Gas is green, biogas is green, and of course we hope that we can send that to other countries. To wrap up, then we deliver a lot of solutions to the big challenges. We are delivering on the sustainable agricultural and food production. We deliver in the circular economy or sustainable waste handling. We are one of the tools to prevent the climate change, and we, of course, can deliver the CO2 content and use that in the power to X sector. And of course, the main goal here is to have a society that is fossil-free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for a very interesting speech. One quick question, if any of you have a quick question. Otherwise, we will need to get on with the program in a few minutes. Then I have one quick question for you. This sounds like a fairy tale. What is the biggest challenge, either political or technology-wise, that you stand in front of right now?
Actually, the Danish politicians has made the decisions with subsidy schemes that will bring us to the 100% supply chain. But actually, one of the main challenges we are having right now is that when we put the biogas into the gas grid, and a company or a consumer wants to use that, then it's being handled as if it was a fossil energy source. So one of our main challenges is to make sure that when we use biogas directly, then it's without taxation. And of course, when we deliver through the gas grid, it should also be without tax. What is happening right now in Denmark is that we are at a crossroad. We used to tax the use of energy. Now we will start taxing the CO2 emission. And of course, here we have a tool to reduce the CO2 emissions. And of course, that should be handled positively by the politicians.
One very quick question.
Bruno, due to the election in Denmark, we are a bit in a paralyzed situation. And do you know what effect this has to the Energy Agency and Brussels dialogue concerning the new subsidy scheme? Any progress or whatsoever?
Yes. The question is, we are having a new tender system in Denmark, and will the situation without a government, will that influence that? The Danish Energy Agency has answered the questions that came from the European Commission. So now the Commission is working. So actually, it does not hinder the progress in the system. But of course, when Brussels come back and say it's okay, then we need to have a parliament that can say, yes, now we go for opening the tenders. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's give Bruno a warm applause again.